And for those of you who were lucky enough yesterday to attend our route development training, then our moderator for this panel will be a familiar face. For those of you who've been attending the monthly OAG webinars during the pandemic over the last couple of years, and they're continuing, he will be a familiar voice. You maybe have seen him on BBC, Sky News, Bloomberg. John Grant is a partner at AviaDev Consult, which is powered by MIDAS Aviation. He is one of the foremost experts on route development, having worked on projects spanning the globe. He is also an avid supporter of Brighton and Hove Albion, so unless you probably have never heard of them, but they are actually a real football team, and they do play in the Premier League with real teams like Manchester United, but certainly not Liverpool, Martin. Okay, John, welcome you to the stage. The floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Could the panelists come up, please? John, before you go away, could you do me a great favour, please? Marla, could you come up as well, please? I need to borrow you in the nicest possible way for a second. No, go over there. You're not standing at the same height as me, because it embarrasses me.
Oh, right, yeah.
David,
so much taller.
David and the panelists, please
tower
come
over.
out. Guys, we wouldn't be here today without vaccines, but more importantly, we wouldn't really be here without John and Marla, who, over the last 2.5 years, have done an absolutely incredible job to keep going and to be committed for AviaDev. And you've all been sitting down for about 2.5 hours now, and your bums must be as numb as my bum is. If the rest of the panelists will get out the way, very politely, John and Marla, stand in front of me, please. And can I ask you all to stand up and give them a great ovation for everything they've done. Okay, don't overdo it. And the good thing is I now have a standing ovation from all of you, regardless of what happens in the next hour. So, guys, come up and join me now, please. I'm not going to introduce anyone. You know where their CVs are. It's all on the app if you want to have a look. And you know, we've got 50 minutes to cram in a lot of discussion. So let's crack on. Before we start, though, can I just say that the last time Brighton played Manchester United, it was 4-0 to Brighton, and we put our substitute team on in the second half. Okay, so we're going to start with a question. In fact, 2 questions. So I have to say, Marla, can I please have the first question? And then can you please all answer on your Slidos? So, cargo has been one of the few strengths, as we know, in the aviation industry since 2019. How confident are you in the global market for cargo for the next year? They're taking pictures of you. Yes. Give you a few more seconds to answer that one. Yeah, and Marla, thank you. If you would move on to the second question. And then specifically, from an African market perspective, are you very confident, slightly concerned, or are you very worried? And while you're answering those questions, here's some really boring facts for you. Do you know in 24 hours of cargo, in 24 hours, 80,000 flowers are shipped? That equates to 55 flowers per minute, or 1 flower per second. 22 racehorses get carried somewhere around the world every day. Just think how much urine that must leave in an aircraft after 24 hours. 120,000 tons of Kenyan flowers are distributed per annum. We are indebted to cargo for being here today, because without cargo and vaccines and their circulation, we'd still probably be waiting for the ships to arrive in Australia. So that's the extent of what we're talking about today. So, Marla, can we go back to the first answer, please? Okay. Wow, you're an optimistic bunch, aren't you? 41% confident, very confident, 38% confident, changing a bit. Over 2/3 of you are at least confident. Guys, what do you think? Let's start with you, Martin. What do you think about those numbers? Same sentiment, would you agree with those?
Yes, on a whole, and I think the return to belly cargo from the passenger operations really does help with delivery with our confidence.
And Sanjeev, what about you? Sanjeev, you must have had 2 of the best ever years in your business.
Absolutely, and I just can't complain. But having also participated in the same poll, I decided to vote for confident, not very confident, because the air cargo industry is going through a temporary crisis because of the situation in China. China is still under lockdown. China is contributing to the largest growth of exports in the world. Mm-hmm. And when China is sleeping, then it also affects the rest of the world. So for sure, we're expecting that China will wake up by September, and then there'll be a big rush for all this e-commerce cargo, mobile phones, to go all over the world, including Africa. So we really expect that the situation until September might be a bit slow, but we're expecting that the period from September till December.
So September's 2 months away. I mean, I would describe that as extremely confident, if not bullish, if you think China is going to reopen and start shipping out commodities and goods within the next 2 months. I mean, it must have a huge backlog.
Absolutely. And of course, Shanghai is almost getting ready for opening. Beijing is still closed. Mm-hmm. So we're expecting that it'll take about a month or 2 months for people to get back to the factories and to open up the supply chains. So we're expecting from a very optimistic point of view that the situation from September will be very busy right up until December. And then you've got the Chinese New Year, which takes place in February. So then we'll actually expect some kind of a stagnation during the Chinese New Year for about a month or 2 months. And then again, it'll pick up again.
So you're talking about a window of opportunity in China for perhaps 3 or 4 months?
September to January, yes.
Okay. David, what about you? Surprised by those numbers, or is that your sentiment?
No, I think that's what we've seen in the Western Cape and South Africa as well. I think we've actually recovered our cargo volumes quite quickly in the last year. I mean, speaking from the Western Cape viewpoint, we're still a little bit under because we are reliant on belly freight in the Western Cape and at Cape Town International Airport. So until we get our capacity back up to 100%, we'll always have a little bit of a deficit in terms of our cargo volumes. But I think for our Tambo and for most of Africa, I think we're almost back to full capacity or I don't like saying that anymore, but pre-pandemic levels. So I think it's great. I think we'll see quite a big increase, and especially now going into the some of the exporting seasons that we have around here. So yes.
Okay, Marla, could we have the second set of answers, please, which was specifically about Africa? Pretty similar numbers there. Again, about 3/4 of the people. Zoe, I mean, you're an island.
Yes.
You must be so dependent on the cargo.
Exactly. For importation mainly, but also for exportation. So I'm also aligned with all the response of all the public, but we're still very confident. We are an airport. You said that we are an island. And I think with my team, we have seen in our figures that we still have some increase on the cargo figures. So we're still confident on that.
Mm-hmm. So we've got 2 airlines. We've got an airport, and we've got a wider stakeholder in Wesgro. Specifically a question for the 2 airlines. And Martin, phrasing this politely, how have your bellies been in the last few months?
Quite empty.
Quite empty.
Yeah. With the resumption that we're seeing right now, historically it was being driven by the passenger side, and cargo was the cherry on top. And during COVID, the cherry became the entire meal, and we really had to find a way to survive, reduce our costs. Now, looking into the future, I think the bigger concern here is how do we manage this from a financial feasibility perspective with the rising cost of oil and fuel. And everyone else coming back to Africa, so the demand on the coupon value, the fares we are getting, the value we're getting from cargo is dropping in light of increasing competition, in light of higher operating costs. So that's the bigger concern. And Africa being mostly inbound, that is also driving the emptiness on the return sectors. So within Africa, we still are seeing a bigger challenge in terms of filling the belly.
Apparently, the average cargo load factor, according to IATA, is no more than 62%. Sanjeev, how do you cope with that? I mean, it's a very directional market you're trading in, isn't it? It's very hard to get good load factors in both directions.
Oh, absolutely. And this is one of the reasons why air cargo is generally more expensive, because the imbalances that you get in the flows of cargo are quite serious. And a good example is when you have flights going from West Africa to East Africa. So typically our Boeing 747 flies from Nairobi into Europe, and then from Europe it flies into West Africa with a lot of high yield cargo. Mm-hmm. But then there is an empty leg of 6 hours, which of course is almost $100,000 to $150,000 of lost revenue. So this is a very big problem, and it's not only something that is facing the African carriers, but even if you look at the volume of traffic between China and United States and China and Europe, it's also facing the same imbalances. You have a lot of flights going full from China to Europe, but from Europe to China, the flights are all going empty. So this is a very serious problem for all the industries, for all the airlines. But when it comes to Astral, we have been developing some export cargo from some of the countries we fly to. So for example, if you're flying to Mozambique, we tend to carry live lobsters and live crabs into Nairobi for onward connection to China. The same also applies to Antananarivo, one of the destinations that we fly to on a charter, that there is a lot of export seafood products. So the volumes are not great, but it does make some level of contribution to the bottom line.
And your bottom line, and Martin's yours as well, I guess, the price of fuel is 140% more than it was this time last year. Sanjeev, you were telling me last night you have no hedge. You buy a month in advance. You guys, I probably don't have much of a hedge at the moment. I mean, the cost of operating must be increasing exponentially all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember that in the first quarter of 2020, the Brent crude went down to $20 to the barrel. And now it's approximately $120 to the barrel. So one of the problems that we have in the air cargo industry is most of our aircrafts are very old. And because of that, our fuel cost is significantly higher compared to the more efficient passenger airlines. So in our case, it's almost anything between 45 to 55% of our cost is fuel-based. And this year has been really tough. We've actually had very high fuel prices. And we've also had to pass the cost to the client. But unfortunately, the client and the timing does not really work in your way. You always end up passing about 60 to 70% of the cost, and you end up absorbing the remaining until the following month. So it's been a very difficult balancing act between keeping your customers happy with a competitive value proposition and also making sure that you still cover your operating overheads, which has actually been caused by the high fuel price. So when you look at a sector like Nairobi, Johannesburg, Nairobi, which is a route that we fly 6 times a week, The hourly cost has actually gone up by $2,000. So you're looking at a 4-hour flight, return is 8 hours, you're looking at a $16,000 additional cost of operations on this 8-hour leg. So
that's a big number in itself, but as a percentage of your operating cost, how much more is that costing you a flight in a percentage term?
So I would say realistically at least anything between 30 to 35%.
30 to 35% more?
More, just in the last 5 months compared to what it was last year.
Okay.
So this is going to be a tough year for the air cargo industry just because of the high prices of fuel. And of course, we try and pass all that cost to the client, but there's still a limit as to how much you can really do on a one-to-one basis. So I think the general trend is that you end up keeping some of the cost to yourself and then passing at least a majority of that to the client. And this is the reason why we have inflationary problems, purely because of the supply chain being so dependent on air freight.
Yep.
And of course, this is a very big concern for the industry as a whole.
And Martin, for you, I mean, at least you've got passengers back now, which is helpful. But it's real pressure. And when you look at routes, and you're looking at route performance now, do you look at cargo in a different light than you looked at it 2.5 years ago? I mean, when I was in network planning, we used to go to the cargo offices and just see what they could add to the bottom line after we decided where we were going to fly to. Is it a more important part of your business now? Is it getting more focus within the organization?
Yes, so for most of the markets, actually, it's a resumption because most of the routes we are looking at are routes that we used to historically operate. And the prioritization is being driven by the value that those markets actually drive also in terms of cargo. So where we have a higher cargo demand, we are seeing higher prioritization in terms of going back to those markets as opposed to the ones that are predominantly passenger demand. In terms of the fleet decisions also, we had the converted 787s that were doing P freighter, and because of what Sanjeev is pointing out, the tolerance for operating, the high cost of operating those P freighters, that tolerance has really gone down. So when there are closures or restrictions of operating them to the prime markets, Europe in this case, we are looking at refleet or reconverting them back to passenger, simply because there's a return to passenger, and we're seeing more value being driven by the combinability or combination of both passenger and cargo. There are some also strong cargo markets like Accra for us, where we are the P freight operating. So we are looking at putting the 787s there and removing the P freighters. So we are trying to create a balance between the cargo freighters or P freighters in this case, and our belly cargo. Mm-hmm. So the value of cargo is really driving the network expansion going forward.
David, I'm full of admiration for the success of Cape Town and what you've managed to do in terms of long-haul, wide-bodied capacity that you've brought in recent years. Middle of the afternoon, you go to the airport and it's full of all the towels that you want, and I'm sure you want a few more. How important has cargo been to those airlines in making those decisions to come here?
Traditionally, in the past, it wasn't something that we really focused on, but just when COVID hit, we started a strategy where we started looking at air cargo as the next thing that we need to focus on, especially for Cape Town and the Western Cape. Being a smaller player in the cargo market and being an endpoint, it's a bit more difficult to balance the loads, and I think that's what you also mentioned now. Our seasonality makes it very difficult. When we're exporting things, there's not a lot coming in, and when we're importing electronics and other things during the December season, there's nothing really going out. So we had that problem, and that's part of our focus now. To create the awareness, firstly, in our local market of the opportunities that exist because of the flights we are getting in. So a lot of people that are not aware, that you can fly out of Cape Town and go directly to a number of destinations. Mm-hmm. They still have the the thought process that they need to truck it up to Joburg, or there's only flights going out of Joburg. So I think we're trying to create that awareness. And then what we've seen on the airline side is it's absolutely a integral part of what they want from us now when we do a business case is what can cargo offer, what opportunities are there for cargo when we fly into Cape Town. So we're trying to build that into all of our business cases now, and we're getting a lot of queries from people that we've never heard of before, that want to get into the cargo business. So I think there's really a great opportunity for us to advance this through our project and make that one of the next big things that we're already doing that, but build that out and make it a big success for Cape Town and the Western Cape.
And so you've started building infrastructure for cargo, haven't you? Is that, dare I say, has the bubble burst and you're at the wrong end of that bubble?
We just have built a new infrastructure for passenger. Just to give you a personal experience, we have studied a new infrastructure of cargo since 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. But due to the pandemic, we have postponed this project. And it allowed us, myself and my team, to take some recul, to have a new view of all the studies we have done since 3 years ago. And from my perspective, I think that the keywords for an airport to have a successful project on the cargo is to do some strong studies first and to bring some innovation and also some collaboration. Why? Because, as I said, as a personal experience, when we did the study 3 years ago, we don't take in account too many challenges that we face after COVID. Mm-hmm. So that is very important, and that was the first point, the first beginning since post-COVID. So we study, and we have created also a new, I will say, cargo vision, where we want to go, and to build I will say, how will be the new infrastructures and also the capabilities to be sure that we match with the new needs of the airlines, like Scania, also like Astral. We have already discussed with Sanjeev about that, and to be sure that everything also with all the stakeholders in place, because you have local authorities, you have to discuss also with all the stakeholders in place to be sure that we give a kind of good service, also infrastructure, to them.
And most of you probably don't realize what you're listening to now is unique in aviation, in the context of aviation. It's a cargo panel that isn't at 2 o'clock on the second day of a conference when most people have fallen asleep, which gives you an idea of the priority that cargo's now getting. But guys, how do you keep going? Because I take a step back and, I see, and we're back. So all of those factors, it strikes me that the success of the industry that you've enjoyed for the last 2 years is going to go away, Sanjeev. What are you going to do? Are you going to start some new business, drones or something that's more interesting and profitable?
I started Astral Aviation about 22 years ago, and we've actually had a lot of roller coasters in the last 22 years. We've had Ebola, we've had SARS, we've had, of course, COVID. And what I believe is that behind every challenge, there's an opportunity. And this is just a temporary phase that we are going through. And when you look at the air cargo industry in Africa, it is a very dynamic industry. According to IATA, the intra-African cargo market has the highest growth rate in the world. So when you look at the positives, you look at the African continent free trade area, we're going to be seeing more trade between African countries. And here is a very interesting fact. 70% of the trade that we do as Africa is outside of Africa, and only 30% is within Africa. So one of the things we're expecting is that African countries will start trading more with each other, and that will have a boost on the intra-African growth. But when you look at the international markets, and you know, to be very honest, this does not really give me any sleepless nights. We will get over this. There will be a situation where we expect that from September onwards, we will actually get into a situation of getting into a good level of demand, and also the supply chain will still be very, very resilient. And you know, this is something that we've actually experienced in the last 22 years, and I have no plans to stop what we are doing. We are actually acquiring more aircrafts. We have more Boeing's 767 aircrafts. We're also looking at the Boeing 777 freighters. We've also signed LOIs for the Airbus 330-200 and the Airbus 330-300. So we've got between 15 to 25 aircrafts that we've planned for acquisition from 2023 to 2026, and it's all because of a very simple fact that we have a optimistic mindset, and yet we are also cautiously optimistic in the same pretext. But what we are actually doing is we are setting up new routes. We are looking at new regions. Currently, we are flying from Nairobi, which is our hub, right into Europe. We fly to Dubai, we fly to Hong Kong. We're also starting flights into Tel Aviv and Riyadh. We're also looking at new markets. And this is something which is not going to stop or slow down, because we've actually had a situation of what we call a crisis at the moment. And we will get over it, and we will actually be stronger than ever before.
And Martin, I mean, Sanjeev to me is at the end of the spectrum in terms of optimism. I mean, how do you feel about that from your perspective, with that passenger mix, and that demand that we see now is going to go away in a couple of months' time, because we're living on pent-up demand at the moment in many cases. For David and everyone in Cape Town, it's wonderful because the European low season's going to come along soon, and it's going to be your high season. But for an airline like yourselves, I mean, passenger demand, I suspect, will fall away soon. Rising cost, lowering yields because you're trying to stimulate demand, less cargo. I mean, how do you feel about the winter that you're going to face?
John, there actually are synergies that exist between the passenger and cargo in terms of seasonality. So my natural passenger high season is ideally the low season for cargo, and vice versa. When it's low season for passenger, that's when I have the cargo demand.
They're complementary.
So that does help. Also, what we discovered, one of the biggest lessons from COVID, or the COVID period, was the importance of winning partnerships, and actual winning partnerships that help drive both businesses from a win-win perspective. So we have adopted that also with the cargo sector in terms of driving block space agreements. I heard Simon was sharing here in the morning about our Pan-African partnership. And in actuality, I think this weekend we'll have our first Joburg Mauritius, operated by KQ, but wholly owned or more or less sold by South African. So those kind of partnerships are going to drive success, I think, in the future or coming future. And that's what we are looking at, growing more of those, doing more such opportunities. We did a bit also in Congo with our partner there, with the African partner there, Congo Airways. So we're trying to build those kind of heat maps within Africa, where we've historically had challenges in terms of operation, in terms of filling the belly and the freighters.
David, for you guys, I mean, we've spoken in the past, you've got a really sophisticated trucking operation to Johannesburg, haven't you? Which is great, but it's also a problem. Apart from blowing up the road, which wouldn't really be recommended, how can you persuade more people to develop air cargo here?
I mean, I think the way we see this is, in the first place, I mean, I think I'm very optimistic about the opportunities that exist. And when we try and increase cargo to Cape Town and the Western Cape, we're not trying to steal cargo from anywhere else, because we believe when we increase it, it will create that market stimulation, and it will have a knock-on effect on other airports as well and other regions. Because if you get that economies of scale and you get more aircraft flying in, you're obviously creating a lot of supply, and if the demand exists, you have the perfect mix to just stimulate the market. So in terms of the road, I mean, South Africa is a little bit unique in that because you're traveling 1,600 kilometers to, truck something up. You're adding 2 days to your supply chain, distribution time. But that's just the way it's always been done. So to change that mindset, I think it's going to take a lot of education. It's going to take a lot of creating awareness in the market that there are other opportunities. And obviously we have to look at the price then, because it's a little bit more expensive to fly something out of Cape Town, than maybe out of Joburg. So that's something we have to work on. And then, also getting the exporters in that mindset that they, the freight forwarders, where they've always been doing it the same way, telling them there might be other opportunities here that we can partner with the airlines to, get things flown out of Cape Town directly. We've got the domestic freighters flying, but it's a very small part of what's being trucked up. So, yeah. Probably by cutting off the highway is the only way to do that. I think the other option is also improving our freight rail, which is not part of this panel discussion. But I mean, there's a big opportunity to get things moving on rail instead of road, and then everything that's suitable for air cargo to make that go on the planes. So I think we've got a big opportunity awaiting us, and I'm really positive about it. I think. It's gonna, with people like Sanjeev in the room and Martin, we can have great discussions about how we can improve that intra-Africa percentage of trade as well. So we not taking everything outside of Africa.
So you're, as an island, clearly you have to rely on inbound cargo quite a bit, and you have some outbound products as well. But is there more opportunity for you? I think, I look at countries and islands around the world who've become specialists in the movement of perishable live fish type products, extremely high yield, markets with insatiable appetites, literally, for more and more fresh food. Just to give you an idea, there are 8 Boeing 747s in Oslo every Tuesday afternoon filled with live salmon, or fresh salmon, moving around the world. 8 747s. For you, is that an opportunity that you see or you want to develop?
Yes, exactly what I say to you. That's why we are under a study of a new cargo infrastructure, because we have seen in our study that there is a huge opportunity for Madagascar as an island, because we have a lot of things to export, mainly, as you said, seafoods. We have vegetables also. You have also cacao, chocolate, and rum.
Plenty of rum. Most of it was in this room last night, I understand.
So we are sure, but I will say that the main issue for Madagascar is about, I will say, fair trade. So we have to discuss with all the stakeholders, as we did for the tourism perspective. I will say for the cargo, we have to discuss a lot internally first, to be sure that, I will say, we have all the minimum guarantee of all the products that we have to export is aligned with the standard that the other country wants. So we have already discussed with all the trade ministries, also with the exporter of vanilla or also the lychee, to see how can we help them to increase the exportation, because as an island also, we import a lot, and we try to find some solution to do in the both way. Okay. So it's a little bit complicated, it's challenging, but we will do it. That's why we say that we have to do a big business case when we discuss with a company, to give them all the contacts, all the figures, and they can build a real business case with the air cargo to be sure that it will be good for the airlines, but also for us.
And let's talk about innovation, because cargo's been cargo for how many years? And there hasn't been much in the way of innovation. And Sanjeev, I know you've got an entrepreneurial son who's doing something in this space. But what about the opportunity with drones and the intermodality between road, rail, air, and now drones? I mean, have you just given your son this business because it's a hobby, or because you think there's a real opportunity in drones in a commercial environment in aviation?
Oh, absolutely. Drones is the future of last mile logistics in Africa. And about 3 years ago, we set up a drones business in Kenya. And of course, Kenya Airways has also done the same. But what is unique about our drones business is that we are specializing in large cargo drones, which can, at some point of time in the future, become a part of our fleet. And we are already in discussions with 5 various manufacturers of large cargo drones. And these are drones which can carry more than 100 kilograms, and in the region of about 2,000 kilograms, which can actually fly a distance of about 2,000 kilometers. And this is a reality, and this is something that we are very excited about. And the reason for this is because we've operated in various humanitarian operations in Africa, where infrastructure has been a very big challenge. Offloading and loading equipment has been a very big challenge. But the one which is also quite serious is the safety and the security, especially when you're delivering humanitarian cargo to dangerous countries. And this is something that we are doing every day. So when we looked at developing a fleet of large cargo drones, we expected that the large cargo drones will actually solve all the problems of infrastructure. It will solve the problems of safety and security, and it will actually be at a lower cost compared to what we can be able to go with the fixed-wing aircrafts. So in collaboration with the 5 companies, we've actually already entered into strategic partnerships. And what we are now waiting for is a regulatory approval in Kenya. And once we get the regulatory approval, we will actually do 6 months of pilot projects where we will actually fly on various routes for the United Nations, because we have a letter of intent from the World Food Programme and UNICEF. And this will really help us in carrying humanitarian cargo beyond borders and also into regions which are quite dangerous.
So you'll be able to drop this in inaccessible parts of the country.
Absolutely.
Almost the day the cargo arrives in market, it can be shipped out on a drone to somewhere else. And incidentally, United Airlines have ordered 100 passenger drones for their network. So for those of you that want to hang around, vertical takeoff is going to be the way. David, for you here, I mean, that must be a huge opportunity given the geographic spread of South Africa, location of Cape Town, the markets you could cover. It would revolutionize your position, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it will revolutionize how we approach the distribution. Maybe in the beginning, the last mile distribution, but later on, if you have drones flying between Joburg and Cape Town instead of putting it on the road, I mean, that would revolutionize the industry. So one of the things that we need to obviously get right is the policy and then the regulatory aspects of that, because you could have the technology available, but if you don't have that building blocks in place, then you're going to struggle to implement or to go forward with this. And we don't want to find ourselves in that position where, as Africa and as South Africa and the continent, that we left behind again when the world embraces this, and we are sitting and still debating if it's worthwhile doing it in our country. So I think we need to focus on that as well.
Excuse me. And you, Zoe, you have a couple of domestic airports. I mean, moving cargo between those domestic airports must be challenging. It takes hours to get from one end of the island to the other. I mean, drones and the benefits that will provide. Did you factor those into your strategy, or is that something that's suddenly...
Exactly. For the domestic flights now, you have only the TARADI, the national carrier, which handle the domestic. But I know that they are under restriction, so we discuss a lot with them to be sure that in the part of the next strategy of the group of Air Madagascar, they take in account the cargo in the domestic flight, because the roads in Madagascar are very long, or you have, and Antananarivo is, I will say, the heart of the country, but you have a lot, like the vanilla, it's from the north of Madagascar, so to come in the center, it takes too much time. So yes, so we take an account this thing about the domestic flight in our strategy, but we have to convince first the national carrier. But they also convince on that, so that's why we try to build a commune strategy with them to be sure that it will be a success for both of us.
Sanjeev, you mentioned the regulator and getting the regulator ready for this. I mean, from what we've heard this morning, the regulator has trouble keeping up with the pace of aviation, full stop. Do they have the capabilities? Do they have the knowledge? Or is this going to be a barrier to development?
Now, the amazing thing is that the drone regulations do exist in a lot of countries in Africa. I would actually say that about 40% of African has drone regulations. And when we look at the growth of the drone technology, we believe that whereas the regulator has a very important role to play, governments are also giving permission to drone companies to launch drone operations in their respective countries. And when we look at opportunities, we believe that, for example, in Madagascar, there are huge opportunities, Mozambique, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic. Any country which has very poor infrastructure, has a disparity in the population levels, are countries which will automatically attract drone technology. So currently,
so you mean the whole of Africa?
Well, technically all of Africa, except for South Africa.
Except for South Africa, yeah.
When you look at the infrastructure in South Africa, I mean, when you look at Kenya, we have great infrastructure as well. But you know, when you look at our neighbor Tanzania, Tanzania is a really big country, and the road infrastructure is not so great. So there are potential use cases, and typically what usually happens is that you start with medical deliveries, and a good example is Rwanda, where they started the delivery of blood between the different hospitals and the clinics. So when you look at the potential use cases, you've got the medical sector, you've got the humanitarian sector, you've got e-commerce, and of course you've got postal and mail, because you still have many parts of Africa which does not have a postal or a mail system because there are no addresses. So the advantage that you have with drone technology is that you can actually be able to leapfrog and actually go to new technologies much quicker than the traditional form of technology. And this is what happened with the mobile phones and all that.
And talking of e-commerce, I mean, I think it's fascinating that eventually and finally Amazon launched Amazon Prime, and you know they're not mucking around in terms of aircraft they're getting and their ambition, and they're going to come to a city near you soon, like it or not, if they're not already there. Is that complementary, a competitive threat, or is it going to change the whole way that e-commerce behaves and the supply chain works?
I think that's a really good question, and I think the value proposition is time. Because remember, you are selling time, and you're selling an expedited delivery service. So if it takes 2 days to get a delivery compared to 2 hours, and you're willing to pay for it, then why not? And this is really where we believe that when it comes to e-commerce, you cannot have an e-commerce product where you have to wait for 1 month for your delivery. And this is the case in a lot of countries in Africa. What you're looking at is the future of e-commerce in Africa has to be within 4 days.
Within 4 days?
So from the time you click the button,
wow,
you should be able to get a delivery within 4 days compared to 14 to 30 days.
Wow.
And this is where the future of e-commerce, and it's not us, it's our children who need quick deliveries. It's also our businesses.
My wife orders at 9 o'clock in the morning and doesn't tell me, and it's in my house by 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, there you are.
And you're waiting 4 days for... Yeah. That's absolutely incredible. But I guess that's the pace of change that we'll see. What else are the big innovations that you see coming around? What are the opportunities that cargo has? Is it obviously within Africa there's big opportunity. Is it market-based? Is it product-based? David, is it for you guys, is there diversification of product that you can move by cargo that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of potential in some of the commodities that we're not moving at the moment. We have our traditional products, you know, fruit, flowers, perishables, seafood is obviously massive for us. And then the e-commerce space has just grown immensely in South Africa, and I think that's going to spill over to the other African countries. We at least can get a delivery in a day here as well. So it's, you know, it's locally, not internationally. But I think with Amazon Prime coming, it's gonna change the way things are done. So I think there's great opportunity for growth there. I think we need to focus on our infrastructure. Obviously, there's a lot of gaps there. I think for us, it's criminal that we don't have a dedicated perishables facility in Cape Town. I mean, that's one of our main strengths. That's how we want to do our exports. That's where we make the money. But you know, it's something we want to also work on and make sure that airside and landside we've got the right infrastructure to accommodate this growth that's coming. And we see Cape Town as one of the leaders in e-commerce on the continent. And although we're right at the end of the continent, I think we've got a role to play going forward.
And I guess the whole thing for every airport operator is that the airport is not a cargo centre, it's not a passenger centre, it is a complete business park of which cargo and passengers are just one element. And if you've got more cargo and more perishable product, then it drives more businesses to come on site at the airport and locate. And that must be happening in for you, Zoe, where you are. I mean, if you're looking to build, you've got to build offices and service industries and support structures.
Exactly. We have to build not only a new infrastructure, but we have to, I will say, you have to consider four main strategic points to be sure that it will be a successful project. I will think that the first one is how can we facilitate maximum the flow of goods. You have to give to the airlines and also to all the stakeholders a modern infrastructure, but you have also to take account all the extensive range of service that you can offer. The second one will be about how to stimulate cooperation between all the air freight community, freight players also, locally mainly, and
I guess you get used to living with this, don't you? Here, we're back. Yep, go on.
And the last one point is about digital cargo. What I see during my study is that the air cargo industry has been lack of true digital integration for too long. So it's important when we take account the new project to see how we will manage all the digital aspect of the project. This situation prevents stakeholders from truly efficient collaboration, as I already said, but also reliance on, on manual processes. And we still have before some day-to-day visibility, so digital cargo will be very helpful for all the stakeholders.
It's a very interesting point. Data. I find it really difficult to get hold of good cargo data anywhere in the world. Why? What is the problem? Is it a secret? Don't you want to tell anyone? Don't you know what you're carrying? Is it all white stuff that looks like powder and shouldn't be carried? What is this thing about cargo that everyone who looks at a market says, I can tell you how many passengers, I haven't really got a clue about cargo? Yeah. Why?
Yeah, I think perhaps I can just talk about data, because it's a collaboration between the airline, the airports, the ground handlers, and somewhere along the way there's a disconnect. So we have all the data.
Just one disconnect?
Well, it's a multiple series of disconnects where even in my own country, we cannot get accurate data of the cargo coming in and cargo going out, but what is in transit. So this is where blockchain and digitalization plays a very important part. And we really believe that as a continent, we really need to invest in digitalization. We need to have data at the top of our fingertips. And this is something we're not getting. We have already got different partnerships with different organizations which gather data. But what we've also done is that we've also reached out to different bodies, including ACI, including AFRA, including IATA, to actually try and see how we can actually be able to collect this.
You know, you worry me is as soon as you say you're collaborating with ACI, AFRA and IATA about data, I immediately think nothing's going to happen.
Oh, no. Believe me, something is going to happen.
Because there is a history of nothing ever happening.
Yeah, but you know, this is where we as the private sector are making a very big difference. So Martin and I are working together in an AFRA committee called the Cargo and the Network Committee. And what we are trying to do as committee members is actually trying to take baby steps between our own airlines to share this data, so that this data can be readily available. But it's also about receiving and sharing, because remember, you can only share data, but you also need to get data in return as well.
Okay, let me ask another airline. Would you be happy to share your data?
Gadhia. Okay, there are restrictions to how much data you can
There's
share.
restrictions on what?
There are restrictions, but there are always ways around in terms of either if it's a partner that you're more or less working together with, you have a loyalty program or a reward program. There are bits and pieces of how much you can really share. But maybe just to add to what Sanjeev was explaining, that some of this is being driven by the fact that we are not as innovative, or we are not driving that innovation. Either from the data perspective in terms of putting it together and sharing it out there. So we are conscious of this fact, and I also have the same frustration, by the way, of getting cargo data. And now with the more importance, or the high importance we are putting on cargo, we really need that data visibility. So for us, we actually launched in partnership with Google, and that's why it's good to have those partners out there also to rely on and pick on in terms of the IT infrastructure. We launched an innovation center to try and drive some innovation in these areas, which is basically headquarters at our head office. So we are looking at how can we make the IT infrastructure a bit more predictable, and being able to protect that data, because also where we operate the jurisdictions, we need to be able to protect the data. So all this comes to basically setting a central data point from a passenger perspective, from a cargo perspective, to drive those decisions.
Okay. There's a couple of questions on Slido at the end, so maybe we'll go to those because we are running out of time. And I'm not important enough to run over by 50 minutes. So having managed to stay awake during the last 50 minutes, are you now, from a global perspective, increasingly confident? Your view remains unchanged? I'm slightly more concerned now, or crikey, it's not great, is it? And then I think there's a second question, but answer this one first. And just to say, if anyone has any questions they want to ask the panel, by all means, just stick your hand up. And I think we have a roving mic. No, we don't have a roving mic. We haven't got time. You'll have to ask them afterwards. Okay, so what votes have we got on this question then, please? Have we, can we move on? Increasingly confident. Unchanged, increasingly confident. We haven't managed to move the needle of negativity, which is really good, and I'm really pleased about that. So if we're going to have to give up now, can I ask you to thank the panelists for their time and their contributions, but most importantly, could you thank Zoe, because this is your first panel in English, isn't it? Exactly. And and there was absolutely no way we were going to do this in French. So thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you.